Doctor Who is a show with a rich and expansive history of spin-off material. From K9 and Company to the slightly more well-received Sarah Jane Adventures, the Doctor's former companions like Captain Jack, or they're not really companions, but this random group of school kids and that woman, often spin off into their own show to have their own adventures alongside those of the time-travelling Doctor. And with a new spin-off on the way later this year, The War Between the Land and the Sea, I thought in this video we'd take a look at some of the spin-offs that were in production but never got made, and some of the suggestions for spin-offs that I think should absolutely happen. I mean, Russell T Davies created this Whoniverse. It was supposed to be the Marvelification of Doctor Who, a modern-day version of what they did back in the early 2000s, where you had Doctor Who, you had Torchwood, and you had the Sarah Jane Adventures all running simultaneously. We've also had the announcement very recently of the CBeebies Doctor Who spin-off, which is basically Bluey combined with Doctor Who aimed at 4 to 5-year-olds. But first on this list, let's cast our minds all the way back to the original Russell T Davies era. Russell was determined to create a spin-off for CBBC, the kids' version of BBC, so for like 6 to 11-year-olds. Initially, the ideas pitched were Rose Tyler, Earth Defense, which would follow Rose and the parallel Torchwood in the parallel world fighting off aliens in a very, very similar vein to the Sarah Jane Adventures, but ultimately this idea was never used. I can't lie, I kind of like it. I mean, we're kind of going to get it now with Billie Piper as the Doctor, but yeah, well, what would you have thought of the Rose Tyler Earth Defense adventures? They have, in more recent years, made Big Finish audio adventures of Rose Tyler Earth Defense, but they're probably for a slightly more grown-up audience than this CBBC kids show was made to be. Now, one of the other ideas floated around that Russell actually vetoed and was like, nah, we'll leave that on the cutting room floor, was an exploration of the Doctor, but as a kid. So this would have been like Gallifrey, but with kids. So the Doctor's history, which is a really bizarre choice because that kind of like, I don't know, the mystery of the show, Doctor Who, you don't want to answer the question of who the Doctor was, but this series would likely have followed the Doctor and the Master as young kids. Although Russell got a bit shaky on the idea because do kids want to watch kids on TV? Not always. They often want to feel more grown up, don't they? Like, Sarah Jane Adventures, I think, was the perfect kids show for that era. Like, they weren't kids, but they were slightly older, like teenagers, so kids would still look up to them while still feeling youthful and in touch with that generation, while also having fan favourite Sarah Jane there, so parents could sit with their kids and be like, I used to watch Elizabeth Sladen when I was your age. 10 out of 10 show. Big up the Sarah Jane Adventures. Now, speaking of Russell and his spin-off ideas, there was a heavily rumoured spin-off to be happening around the time of the 60th anniversary, when all of the bi-generation stuff happened, and there were these big bi-generation leaks. Everybody was talking about the fact that we're gonna get a spin-off of the 14th Doctor and Donna Noble, and the 60th adventures were gonna continue, and it never happened, and I don't actually think it was ever going to happen. I like to believe, at least, that Russell has more sense than this. Like, that would just be Doctor Who 2.0. What they should have done, rather than that sort of spin-off series, is just, I will stand by this till the day I die, the 60th, and I know it was probably actor availability and scheduling and budgetary reasons, but the 60th should have been an 8-episode series. If you're bringing Tennant and Tate back in the style that you are, if it's only 3 episodes, I feel like it should have been one huge interconnected big plotline story for the 60th, similar to like the way Flux was panning out, rather than 3 completely individual episodes. Or it should have been a slightly longer 8-episode season so you can really flesh out the characters. But I mean, I'm happy with the 60th we got. It's not too bad, but yeah, I can see why people wanted it as a spin-off, and I can see why people were worried it would be a spin-off. It would certainly pull in viewing figures, and I can't lie, it would probably beat actual Doctor Who in the viewing figures, which, you know, that's not ideal. Now, a show that I think must have been pitched somewhere at some point, and I've always stood by this being a genius idea. It's too expensive to do in live action because of all the prosthetics and the time period and setting, but an animated Paternoster Gang spin-off for CBBC, for kids, I genuinely think would have been a 10 out of 10 idea. So that Strax, Vastra and Jenny, back in the day, they were popping off. They're very clearly like kids' characters. Like, obviously you get the occasional reference to like, oh, Jack the Ripper or whatever, but you don't want to talk down to kids. Obviously you can't go full horror with the show, but I think it would be a very nice sort of Sarah Jane-esque animated show in particular. Like, the designs are very eye-catching in animation. I used to have like a little poster of Strax, Vastra and Jenny in a sort of animated cartoon comic book style, and that's always clicked in my head and gone, that really should have been a spin-off back in the day. Like, animated adventures in Victorian London with those three bizarre protagonists, and maybe in the final episode of the season the Doctor helps up to show them the way. Something like that would have, that's a brilliant idea in my opinion. Another one which actually kind of did happen over on the Doctor Who official YouTube channel a couple of years back, but a Daleks spin-off. Just the Daleks. Adventures of the Daleks. Like, they're so popular, they're so iconic. Dalek Mania back in the 60s, I really think at some point there should have just been a Dalek series. They have had their own run of comic books and stuff, but and once again, I think budgetary reasons, like, doing it as a live action wouldn't be great, but yeah, doing a Dalek animated series, but not in the style of animation they used on the YouTube channel, something slightly higher budget, I think that could be a really cool idea. And if this Whoniverse was expanding, I think that would be a nice way of using the Daleks without having them in the main show. Still having that iconography, still having it like, this is the showrunner brain talking, but having it like make a profit, making merchandise. Like, the Daleks would pop off, and I feel like it would build up and build up and build up if we hadn't seen them in the main show for years, and then they finally come back after this big animated show about their return. That could be really cool. Now, another one which I think is a perfect idea, and this is literally just stealing from Marvel, quite frankly, but it works better for Doctor Who than it does for Marvel, in my opinion, an animated What If series. Now, you could do this about any episode of Doctor Who ever. Like, what if Sutekh survived at the end of Pyramids of Mars? Or what if the Doctor didn't say goodbye to Rose on Doomsday and all of that stuff? Especially if you used the medium of animation, you could literally get Tom Baker back. You could get any of the surviving Doctors back. You could even have an adventure with John Pertwee or William Hartnell or Christopher Eccleston or any of these by using voice artists. Like the wonderful people at Big Finish who do such banger impressions of these classic Doctors. You could have them voice them in an animated series and continue their adventures. Or, as I say, a What If series would be ideal, because there's so many pinnacle moments in Doctor Who. What if? Like, what if the Time War never ended? What if the Time War never started? Where would the show have gone? Where would the characters go? An animated What If series is perfect for Doctor Who, and it should have happened on Disney+. In a way, it's kind of like Tales of the TARDIS, like an excuse to bring back the old actor and companion, to have another go, have another throw of the dice at these characters. Like, that would have been really cool. Obviously, the idea of an 8th Doctor spin-off always gets thrown around. I think we've probably passed the point of that happening ever. If it were to happen, like, I'd still be here for it. I'd love it. Paul McGann is great, and he's a lovely guy. Like, I met him at a Comic-Con once. He's so chill, so friendly. But yeah, if they were going to do this, I think it should take the structure of the 60th, 3 big feature-length specials, building up to one, like, huge, whoa, plot twist, similar Flux sort of style, all interconnected, telling the tale of the Time War, and then it builds up to Night of the Doctor, where he finally regenerates. That, in my opinion, would just, it would be so cool, and you'd get all that Dalek action in there. I wouldn't say animate this one, I'd say do it live action while Paul McGann is still, like, looking like the Doctor. That would be cool. But yeah, I think it's probably too high budget, and the only thing, like, is it just Doctor Who? But again, I think in some aspects, yes, but also if you make it one big movie-length story piece, like 3 interconnected episodes about the Time War, it's drastically different from normal Doctor Who. I've always wanted to see the darker side of the Doctor properly explored. If we saw what pushes him to become the War Doctor, that would be pretty neat. Just a funny idea to throw here, but the Pantheon Cafe. Right, you know how there was like that how it should have ended superhero cafe where like Batman and Superman would sit in a cafe, like this animated YouTube series that you can go and watch old episodes of. Yeah, do that, but for the gods. I want to see Sutek, Maestro, the toy maker, Omega at a board meeting going, right, so this is my plan. I'm going to write Sue Tech, like really lead into the comedy. Maybe this could be like a YouTube exclusive 5-minute short sort of spin-off. I mean, maybe we'll make it. If that's something you guys are interested in, the wonderful Rory Stock, he's happy to animate it. This could be a reality. Let me know if you want it in the comments, but I just think that's such a funny idea. They should have done it officially, but if not, we'll pick up the pieces. And my final suggestion sort of rounds this off because it's also not a suggestion, it's a bit of a theory. The War Between the Land and the Sea's official Instagram page is called The War Between. Not The War Between the Land and the Sea. Now that could be, understandably, because it's a very, very, very wordy title. But I think it's a template series. So it's this idea that it wouldn't always follow Unit versus Sea Devils, that's just the war between the land and the sea. But the title, The War Between the Something and Something, was the idea. So each season of The War Between would have followed a different antagonist and protagonist, or group of protagonists and antagonists, fighting some sort of battle. So this one is Sea Devils versus Unit. You could have the Daleks versus the Time Lords and delve into the Time War a bit, maybe tying in with our 8th Doctor idea. The Sontarans versus the Rutans. You could have Cybermen versus other Cybermen, Daleks versus other Daleks, the war between the Duh and the Duh. I think that could have been the original plan. Now, I think because Disney are pulling out, it's unlikely that this spin-off will actually continue. I mean, in the current Doctor Who climate, it's kind of unlikely that any of these will currently be made, although they are doing the CBeebies animated show, so it's not impossible. But until actual Doctor Who's commissioned, I don't think we're going to see any of these spin-offs. But let me know in the comments what spin-offs you'd like to see. If you maybe want a follow-up to this video, I might, but let me know in the comments and I'll put it on my Instagram story and read some of the spin-off suggestions that you guys have, because, yeah, it's always interesting to hear from you lot. But thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you did enjoy. As ever, if you did, please do remember to like, comment, subscribe, share. You know the drill. You know this stuff by now. Thank you very much. Check out the Patreon if that's your thing, and goodbye.
Don't forget to click below and subscribe to the official Confused Adipose YouTube channel.
I will destroy you!
She's not seen a single episode.
No, I've watched your episodes.
Keep these sonic screwdrivers.
What else am I saying about the film? Don't watch this one.